Ever get into those, those little arguments with your partner about who does more around the house?
Oh, yeah.
It's like a classic,
Yeah.
right? Well, today's deep dive takes that relatable squabble straight into the world of divorce court.
Oh, boy.
We are diving into the case of Bekmazian v. Iskejin,
Okay.
where a seemingly simple phrase like traditional marriage
Right.
becomes this whole battleground of like competing narratives.
And the stakes couldn't be higher, right?
Oh, tell me more.
Because it's not just about hurt feelings.
Yeah.
It's about who gets financial support
Okay.
and how much.
Exactly. So we're talking about Marlene and Michael, married for 25 years, now battling it out in an Ontario Superior Court.
Wow, okay.
And we're working with the actual court ruling from 2015.
Oh, wow.
So this is the real deal. What's so fascinating to me is how this case reveals just how differently two people can experience, like, the same marriage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Marlene, the applicant, claims theirs was a, classic traditional marriage. She says she pressed pause on her own career aspirations to support her husband Michael's career and raise their children.
Makes sense. It's a common story.
Yeah.
But Michael, the respondent, he's painting a different picture.
Oh.
He claims Marlene wasn't exactly a quote-unquote stay-at-home spouse,
Yeah.
that she had plenty of opportunities for personal and professional growth.
Interesting.
He even suggests she earned a decent income from teaching piano,
Really?
basing his estimate on the number of students at her recitals.
Wow. So it's a classic he said, she said situation, but with this whole legal twist.
Right.
These conflicting narratives about their marriage directly impact their claims for spousal support.
Because if Marlene truly put her career on hold for the family,
Yeah.
she might be entitled to more support, right?
Exactly. Spousal support, especially after a long marriage, isn't just about making ends meet.
Right, right.
It can also be about acknowledging the economic disadvantages one spouse might face for taking on the lion's share of childcare or homemaking, especially if that impacted their long-term earning potential.
Which is exactly Marlene's argument.
Okay.
But hold on, there's a whole other layer of complexity here.
What's that?
Because both Marlene and Michael claim to be, really struggling financially.
Oh, wow.
In fact, they're both accusing the other of hiding assets.
Yes. This financial fog is a crucial part of the case. And the court documents actually show that this wasn't the first time these accusations were being thrown around.
Really?
Apparently, there were multiple attempts to get both parties to, come clean about their financial situation.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
So there's this underlying tension about who's being truthful, who might be trying to game the system.
Right.
And that adds this whole other dimension to the judge's challenge. They're not just deciding on spousal support, they're also playing financial detective.
Precisely. And this is where Justice Laliberté's job gets really, really tricky.
Yeah.
Remember, they have to cut through the emotional baggage, the accusations, and the financial fog to make a decision based on the law.
And this wasn't a quickie divorce.
No.
We're talking 25 years of marriage, potentially a lot of entangled finances.
Okay.
You've got to wonder, listening to this, how common are these situations?
Oh, incredibly common. And often, these kinds of cases, they really hinge on the evidence.
Yeah.
Or the lack thereof.
Okay.
Which is what makes this case so interesting.
Okay, so we've got dueling narratives, we've got a financial mystery, and a judge who needs to make a decision with potentially huge consequences.
It's a lot.
What happens next?
Well, before tackling the spousal support itself, Justice Liberté had to address a few curveballs Michael threw their way,
Okay.
which really speaks to the legal strategies at play in these situations.
So Michael tried to pull a fast one, huh?
Well, kinda, yeah.
What'd he do?
So he actually requested to separate the divorce itself from the financial issues.
Interesting.
He wanted to finalize the divorce quickly,
Okay.
which seems kind of strategic to me.
Ah, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
So if they're already divorced,
Right.
maybe he thought he'd have a stronger case against paying spousal support.
Exactly. But Justice Liberté wasn't letting him off that easily.
Oh, no.
They shut down that request because Michael didn't prove that granting the divorce wouldn't harm Marlene financially.
That makes sense. You can't just leave one person high and dry, especially after a long marriage, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
And remember, Marlene was concerned about losing coverage under Michael's health plan
Right.
if they were divorced.
Yeah.
This is actually a really common concern in divorces,
Oh, wow. I hadn't even thought about that.
especially for couples where one spouse might be financially dependent on the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So did he provide the necessary documents to prove she'd be covered?
He did not, which the judge even calls out in the ruling.
Oh, really?
This lack of transparency plays into the bigger issue of disclosure that we talked about earlier.
Right. Because they were both accusing each other of hiding assets,
Exactly.
which the judge had to sort out.
Exactly.
The judge even had to lay down the law, basically saying, look, we can't make any fair decisions until we have a clear picture of everyone's financial situation.
Wow. Talk about awkward family finances.
Right.
So how does this all play out? Did they ever get to the bottom of the finances?
Well, that's where it gets even more interesting.
Okay.
The ruling itself focuses on determining interim spousal support,
Okay.
meaning it's not a final decision.
Okay, so this is like a temporary support order.
Yeah.
Until they can hash out the rest of the divorce proceedings.
You got it. And this is important because it speaks to the complexity of these cases.
Right.
It's not always a clean break.
No.
It can take time to unravel years of shared finances, especially when there are accusations of hidden assets.
Yeah, and don't forget, we still have Marlene's claim that she put her career on hold.
Right, right.
How did that factor into the judge's decision on spousal support?
That was a major factor.
Remember, spousal support in these cases often considers the economic disadvantages one spouse might face because of choices made during the marriage.
So even if Michael disagreed that their marriage was completely traditional,
Right.
the judge might still consider that as a factor in their decision.
Exactly. And this is where understanding the law is so crucial.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't a picture-perfect traditional marriage, as Marlene claimed,
Right.
if her contributions as a homemaker and primary caregiver put her at an economic disadvantage,
Yeah.
the court could still rule in her favor when it comes to spousal support.
That's a really important point. So it's not just about proving that your marriage fit a certain mold.
Right.
It's about demonstrating how choices made during the marriage might have impacted your financial situation.
You got it. And in this case, despite Michael's attempts to downplay it,
Yeah.
the judge clearly felt that Marlene had made a case for needing spousal support.
Okay, so we know the judge sided with Marlene on that point.
Yeah.
But what about the actual amount? How much did the judge award in spousal support?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Justice LaLiberte ultimately ruled in Marlene's favor,
Okay.
granting her $2,587.50 per month in spousal support.
Wow. That's not chump change.
Not at all. And remember, this is just the interim support.
Right.
The final amount could be higher
Right.
or lower,
Yeah,
depending on what happens with the rest of the divorce proceedings.
that makes sense. But hold on, we haven't even touched on Marlene's request for retroactive spousal support.
Oh, right.
Didn't she want payments dating back to their separation in 2012?
You're right. I almost
Okay.
forgot about that.
Yeah.
That was definitely another layer to this case.
Yeah.
Marlene felt she was owed support for those 3 years. They were separated, but not yet divorced.
Oh, okay.
So
Did she get the retroactive support?
that's where things get a little tricky.
Oh.
While she initially requested it,
Yeah.
her lawyer actually chose not to push for it during this particular hearing. They needed more evidence to back up her claim,
Okay.
particularly why she hadn't received any support in those 3 years,
Right.
and what factors might justify getting that back pay.
So it's not off the table completely.
Right.
Just something they'll revisit later with more evidence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It really highlights how these cases are often a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
There's a lot of back and forth legal maneuvering
Yeah.
and gathering of evidence to support each side's claims.
This case is like a legal thriller.
I know.
So much going on behind the scenes.
Mhm.
We've got the spousal support ruling, the back and forth about the traditional marriage narrative,
Yeah.
and now this whole retroactive support angle.
Right.
What else could this case possibly throw at us?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that spousal support wasn't the only financial issue on the table.
Oh, really?
Justice Liliberte also addressed a pretty significant asset in Michael's name, a life insurance policy.
A life insurance policy. Okay, so we're like really getting into the weeds of their finances now. What's the story with that?
Well, during the proceedings, it came out that Michael had this life insurance policy,
Okay.
and Marlene requested to be named as the beneficiary.
That makes sense, especially if she's like depending on the spousal support, right?
Yeah.
Having that life insurance would at least, protect her financially if, God forbid, something were to happen to him.
Exactly. It's about ensuring that the spouse who is, financially dependent, often after sacrificing their own career opportunities, has some security even if the marriage ends.
Yeah, that's a really important point that I hadn't even considered. So it's not just about the here and now of spousal support,
Right.
but also protecting the future.
Exactly.
Did he put up a fight about the life insurance policy?
You might be surprised to hear that this is one area where there wasn't a lot of back and forth.
Really?
The court documents show that they actually agreed on this point.
Wow. Okay.
Michael was ordered to designate Marlene as the beneficiary,
Okay.
and they both consented.
Wow. So even amidst all this, like, disagreement, distrust,
Yeah.
they managed to find common ground on something as important as, a life insurance policy.
It goes to show you that even in, the most complex and emotionally charged situations,
Yeah.
there can still be room for, cooperation and agreement,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to ensuring financial security for both parties.
This whole case is pretty eye-opening. We often think of traditional marriage as like this straightforward concept,
Right.
but this case really highlights just how messy and nuanced it can be, especially when it comes to like legal and financial matters.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This case isn't just about Marlene and Michael. It really sheds light on a much larger conversation about how we define marriage.
Yeah.
The often unspoken agreements within relationships
Oh, yeah.
and the challenges courts face when trying to, untangle it all.
And what's so fascinating to me is that we're seeing it all play out through this like very specific lens of spousal support, which, as we've learned, is not as simple as just writing a check. It's about acknowledging the economic realities, the sacrifices,
Yeah.
the long-term implications of relationship choices.
Exactly. It kind of makes you wonder, what are the unspoken agreements you might have in your own relationships
Yeah.
about finances, careers, or even how you divide household responsibilities?
Yeah.
These unspoken expectations can have huge implications, especially if you find yourself, navigating a separation or divorce.
It's a lot to think about, for sure. It makes you realize that what seems like a simple concept, like even just the phrase traditional marriage,
Right.
can become like incredibly complex when you bring in legal definitions, financial realities,
Yeah,
and the very human emotions that are at play.
absolutely.
Well, that's a wrap on today's deep dive. We went from the courtroom to the intricacies of spousal support,
A lot to unpack.
uncovering the hidden layers of what it really means to be in a quote-unquote traditional marriage.
Yeah, a lot to think about.
Definitely a lot to think about. Until next time, be sure to follow us so you don't miss our next deep dive.